And these sums of money, I repeat, are being borrowed by the government to maintain our present standard of living. They're borrowing £1 billion a day to maintain our standard of living. So, question, what does this mean for your families and for my family? What it means, if you choose to do the little sum, and I invite you to check. I gave this speech in Melton Mowbray in Leicestershire, and there was a woman in front of me as I was doing the figures. She was writing them down. And I said, yeah, check it out. Check out what I say. Because it is frightening. I'll give you the figures. We borrowed last year £165,000 million. From the point of view of the average family in Britain, given that there's about 55 million of us Britons in Britain, if you take the average family to be 5 persons, a very simple family, man, woman, 3 kids, or man, woman, 2 kids, and an age-dependent parent, yeah? From a point of view of a family of 5, given that there's 55 million of us, that means there's 11 million families. You know, I used to be if I'm losing you, sorry, I used to be a maths teacher, but I like doing these sort of sums. And the woman in front of me was writing all this down. Anyway, I'll tell you where I'm heading for. And I said to the woman, am I right? She said, you're right. The average family standard of living is propped up, supported by this rate of borrowing by our government to the tune of £300 a week. £300 a week is what they're borrowing on our behalf to prop up our standard of living. Now, there's a whole load of questions come out of this. The first question is, what would happen if the British government on Monday morning, and this has happened to the Greek government, it's about to happen to the government of the Irish Republic, if the government was to go to the international money markets and say we want to borrow £1 billion like we did before, and they say, sorry, no dice, no deal. If and when the borrowers feel that the government can't pay this money back or can't pay the interest, if there is a thought of default, then the money will stop, and instantly our standard of living would drop instantly by £300 a week. Your families, my families, because it's based on borrowing £1 billion a day. This single fact that I've just given you shows why the Times, whilst the votes were being counted, and the Times deliberately insulted the politicians, because the politicians, Lib, Lab and Con, they're just trash. They're puppets and trash. And the money boys control the world. They certainly control the world when you're in debt to them to billions of pounds. This is what the Times said. The rhetorical flights of the election campaign are over, meaning all the hot air the politicians come out with is all nonsense and lies and garbage. The polite term is rhetorical flights, as the Times prints. The perilous state of our economy. Right, I've quoted the Times, I'm going to quote somebody else. Because on your behalf, ladies and gentlemen, on your behalf, when my hair's not falling out on my head, sad story, I don't want you to start crying on my behalf. Look, some of us manage to keep our hair. Some do, some don't. It's an unfair world, but there's no point in complaining about it, because no one ever listens. Anyway, I've quoted the Times, I'm now going to quote the Financial Times. This is what the Governor of the Bank of England, Mervyn King, had to say. On the front page of the Financial Times, he said, the nice decade is behind us. The nice decade is behind us. And well, I was going to quote some Hollywood film star, but I won't. Who was it? Bette Davis. As Bette Davis said, because I used to watch these films when I was a kid, as Bette Davis said in that film about an aeroplane going through an electric storm, she said, tighten your safety belts. It's going to be a bumpy ride. And it certainly is going to be a bumpy ride. But if we've got our safety belts on, look, what is our role? What is our role? Our role is to tell the British people, Britain is in trouble, there's big problems coming. Brace yourself. If you brace yourself and put that safety belt on, you can survive a lot of unpleasant situations. If you know what's coming. And our job is to tell the British people, brace yourselves, brace yourselves. That was Mervyn King. And Mervyn King said that the nice decade is over. Also, I'm going to give you a second quote from Mervyn King. Mervyn King said to a friend of his discreetly in January of this year, and the friend told the world, and it got in the newspapers, it's how I come to learn about it, little me down here in South East London. Mervyn King said, whatever party wins the coming general election is going to be hated by the electorate within 2 years because of the cuts that they've got to bring in. The cuts they've got to bring in. The massive budget cuts, because the borrowing has got to stop, because the lending is going to stop. No community, no country can borrow £1 billion a day. Borrowed. Signing bits of paper. I promise to pay you back at 5% interest. I won't try and work out the 5%. We are indebted to colossal sums of money at interest. This Cameron coalition government will bring in a depression, a 1930s depression, such as our grandparents, and in my case, my parents went through. My parents were married just before the Second World War. I was born in the middle of it all. And my parents told me what the 1930s was like. And we're going to go back to that. There's no question about it. We're going to go back to it. The government's already announced budget cuts of 25%. 25% cut is £1 in 4. They're not going to spend on our behalf. Given that government spending accounts for about half the gross national product, you're talking vast sums of money here. The nice decade is behind us. Ladies and gentlemen, since we're in active patriotic politics, I will tell you from now on in, the words on, in fact, I think we actually met it in the general election. We were a bit slow to know what was going on. That's just my little opinion, wise after the event. From now on in, on everybody's lips, it's going to be jobs and the economy. Jobs on the economy is going to dominate British politics. Jobs will be short, welfare will be cut back to the bone. And the party that forms the next government, said Mervyn King, here he is, Mervyn King, front page of the governor of the Bank of England, is going to be hated. The Tories will be hated, but the Tories' role, as always, is to look after the interests of the very, very wealthy people in this country, and we're not going to lose any sleep over worrying about them, because we're going to worry about ourselves. If the Tories are hated, as Mervyn King predicted in a discreet conversation, he didn't mean to tell the world this, his mate then went and told everybody. If the Tories are going to be hated, I think the other half, Tweedledum and Tweedledee, are never going to be forgiven nor forgotten for the problems that they've lumbered this country over the last 11 years. In particular, flooding this country with millions and millions and millions of foreigners who are people, and now in direct competition with for scarce jobs and even scarcer welfare. This is the politics, we've got to give it to these people. The Britain that we are now in is the legacy of decades of failure by Lib, Lab and Con. And my final sentence, Madam Chairman, as you know, we do this first part of the meeting. In this bankrupt, crime-ridden, what's going on in these inner areas of ours, because that ain't going to stop. The crime's not going to stop, on the contrary. In this bankrupt, crime-ridden, flooded with foreigners, Britain, and listen, excuse me, immigration's not going to stop. That absolute creep, Tory creep, Mayor of London, Boris Johnson, as the general election was approaching, Boris Johnson let the agenda out. Boris Johnson said we should give an amnesty to illegal immigrants. That would send a green light to the whole world, all come over here and live at our expense, stuck under, get our jobs, get our welfare. That's what Boris Johnson, one of the leading Tories, said. And another leading Tory, Michael Portillo, said on television, as the general election was approaching, Portillo said, This is what the Tories really think and say, and sometimes say in public. Michael Portillo, a leading member of the Tory party, said, immigration is good for the economy because it's good from the point of view of the bosses, it keeps the wages down. Portillo said, immigration is good for the economy. The other creep, Boris Johnson, said, illegal immigration, give an amnesty, which will bring a load more over. So immigration will continue under these Tories, crime will continue. In this bankrupt country of ours, who will stand up for the British people? Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, we will. Thanks very much. Thanks for your attention.